Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and guests. It is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you all at our first webinar of the Institute of Central Europe this year. Today's discussion is being organized by the Department of Eastern Europe, led by Dr. Jakub. To begin with, I would like to thank our speakers for accepting the invitation for the webinar and the willingness to share their views on contemporary challenges facing Moldova after the 2020 presidential elections. Now, let me announce two speakers for today. Both of them, I believe, are well known. Dr. Octavian Siko is a historian, a politician, and the former Minister of Youth and Sport at the Moldovan government. Since 2019, he has served as a member of the Parliament of the Republic of Moldova and as a chairman of the Party of National Unity. Dr. Siko holds a PhD in history, and his research interests are focused mainly on the Soviet and post-Soviet history, as well as post-communist transition in the Eastern Europe. He is an author and co-author of 10 books, including The Soviet Homo Moldovanus, Theories and Practices of Identity Construction in Moldavian Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic. Our second speaker is Mr. Jakub Pieńkowski. He is an analyst with the Central Europe program of the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Mr. Pieńkowski writes very extensively on Bulgarian, Moldavian, and Romanian domestic and foreign policy. He is a co-author of a book series, Nationality Issues in Central and Eastern Europe. Unfortunately, our third speaker, Mr. Kamil Całus, because of unforeseen reasons, is not be able to participate in today's seminar and discussion. And I have an announcement to make about the form of our conversation. At the beginning, our speakers will have around 10 to 15 minutes for their presentation. Afterwards, we will open our discussion, and we are expecting the questions from the audience via Zoom chat and Q&A section that you can find at the bottom of your screen. So let us begin our webinar, Moldova, New Phase of Integration with Europe. And I'm delighted to invite the first speaker, Dr. Octavian Siko, who will be talking about the alignments of political forces in Moldova after the 2020 presidential elections. The floor is yours, please.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to see you around. As I understand, I have to present a summary of a situation or of my position in order to make some clarification. Hanna?
Yes, yes.
I have to present the general context or to present...
It's better to present the general context of this alignment of political forces in the parliament, and you can also touch the issue of the alignment of forces in the country, speaking about non-parliamentary parties also.
And after will be the questions.
You're right.
Okay. Well, I will start with a brief historical introduction. Moldova, after 1991, evolved in one single direction according to our Declaration of Independence. It was put the idea of union with Romania. And the symbols of state, the Romanian language, the history of Romanians, which I taught in our schools. And then happened the war in Transnistria, which openly was announced as a way to stop the reunification of Bessarabia with Romania. And then we attested the returning power of former nomenclatura, which brought the Soviet arguments of construction of Moldovan identity against Romania. So Moldova evolved. It was the first reaction of returning power of former nomenclatura and accordingly the interests of Russian Federation. Moldova entered into a community of independent states. And then in 1998, 2000, it was the first brief pro-European oriented majority, which put on the agenda the idea of European integration, and the forces pro-European united in an alliance of pro-European parties. It was only for 2 years. And then we had the return in power of conservative communists led by Voronin, which established a roughly authoritarian regime, using the instruments of power and parliament and government. And for 8 years, which of course was divided, first Voronin pledged for union with the Russian Federation and Belarus, and then Voronin pledged for European integration after the rejection of Cossack plan, which meant the federalization of Moldova. And after 2009, for a short period up to 2016 was the period of European integration. Moldova signed the agreement with European integration, association discussion, and so on. And in the end, from 2016 up to 2019 was the Plahotniuc regime, and officially declared as the leader of Republic of Moldova, but in fact it was an oligarchic regime. I will not insist on this point. My first conclusion is in modern history of Republic of Moldova after 1991, there were a period of pro-European integration government, and there were a return in power of pro-Russian forces, which happened including after 2019. So the big dilemma of 2019 situation was the regime of Plahotniuc, but in the same time the presence of Socialist Party, which represent roughly the interests of Russian Federation. And of course, at the moment, the main expression of pro-European orientation was the Bloc Acum, created by 2 political parties, PAS of Maia Sandu and PPDA of Dignity and Truth of Andrei Năstase. Myself and my colleagues from civil society and academic medium and many others representatives of civil society joined the bloc, and we participated in a common bloc, common platform in these elections, and gained the second place after these elections. And as you know, probably, including during this period from 2019 up to this moment, the political context changed 3 times. First, it was an alliance between Bloc Acum, pro-European, and Socialist Party in order to overthrow the regime of Plahotniuc and Shor, which is the author of Milliard affair. We did it, and then it was signed an agreement between Socialist and Bloc Acum. Respectively, many instruments of power were delivered to Socialist Party, including the strong ministries. And after this agreement was renewed in September 2019, that led to a moment when myself, I lived from Bloc Acum, and take the Unionist Party of National Unity. But in the end, after this agreement and the local election, when the Socialists win the mayor of Chisinau, the capital of Moldova, Maia Sandu was dismissed as prime minister, it was signed the agreement between Democratic Party of Plahotniuc and Igor Dodon. So for 1 year approximately, it was an uncertain from external orientation government, which faced the pandemic and the consequences of economic problems, with a lack of support from European Union, Romania, and the main partners, which in the end lead to the current situation when the Democratic Party, after presidential elections, retreat from government. And we have a situation when in parliament there is no clear majority. Of course, the situation changed after the presidential elections, but not in the way of expected hopes, because as you probably know, Moldova is a parliamentary republic, and like Dodon previously and Voronin, which had a firm majority in parliament, Maia Sandu has no one. So we have a situation on uncertainty and stalemate, which make the president weak in face of a majority in parliament. From one side, pro-European, let's say, society or pro-European voters represent, according to the November elections, approximately 57%, which is one of the largest pro-European support afforded to leaders of in the Republic of Moldova. But the problem is how to transform this support pro-European into the next parliamentary elections, which all important actors in actual parliament and extra parliament want to dissolve. So the situation is complicated by the way in which we have to dissolve the parliament, which will be the constitutional tools to dissolve the parliament. Socialist Party, PAS Party of Maia Sandu, and many others, practically all political parties want to dissolve parliament, more or less declarative or for sure, but we are looking for the instruments how to do it. Respectively, the situation from point of view of external orientation is a debate, but in a low key. So the main problem is how to dissolve the parliament, because the actors have their own, how to say, calculation and reasons to believe that the actual context of parliament will be changed. PAS is sure that they can cap the majority of the voters, but the dilemma of Maia Sandu is that they will have majority, but will be in opposition with the Socialist Party, Renato Usatăi, and Shor, which are pro-Russian and so on. So shortly, my brief presentation will end with a conclusion that there is a risk for Republic of Moldova that the pro-European vote which was expressed for Maia Sandu will not be the same in the next Parliament of Republic of Moldova. And we may discuss about later some details about this path.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very interesting and concise presentation. It is my great pleasure to ask the next speaker, Mr. Jakub Pieńkowski to have his presentation. He will be talking about the perspectives of Moldova's relations with its neighboring countries after the elections of the new president, Maia Sandu. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for your kind invitation. I'm glad to be here. So I will try to introduce you a situation which is in Moldova and in its relation with its neighbors. Moldova has, in fact, just two states, Romania and Ukraine. And after the end of presidency of Mr. Dodon, relations with both of them, in fact, were frozen. It's in fact very difficult to frozen relation with all neighbors if you have just two of them. You will need to try very hard to do it, and Dodon achieved it. And what was the reason why this happened? First of all, we need to take a look on relations with Romania, which in Dodon's policy was very specific. Because as probably you know, Dodon and his PSRM party of socialists, is pro-Russian, but also anti-Romanian, anti-unionist party, which support the idea of Moldovanism. It's a kind of state ideology which says that Moldovans, maybe they have quite similar language to Romanians, but it's different language, and they are not Romanians. Or even Romanians occupied a part of former Moldovan principality. So in his policy, in his identity policy, Romania was presented as a dangerous state who tried to an annexation of Moldova. So, for example, during his presidential campaign, not this one, but the previous one, there were presented, for example, materials with question: if you want Romanian gendarmeria to come back, vote for, this time it was for Sandu. So Dodon tried to scare own society with, so in fact, Soviet idea of Romanian fascism. Even the term of Romano-fascist was used. So with this kind of policy, good relations with Romania were absolutely impossible. At the end of his term, Dodon tried to make it warmer. He started to talk about brothers from the other side of the Prut River, that Romania is a sister country of Romania, but in fact, Romanian authorities, for example, President Iohannis and Romanian diplomacy, tried to avoid meetings with Dodon. For example, Dodon many times tried to visit Bucharest with his official trip. Every time this was not accepted by Romanian side. From Ukraine, what to do with this? The most problematic question was when Dodon said that, in fact, after Russian annexation of Crimea, that he said that in fact Crimea is Russian because it's inhabited by Russian population. So with this kind of statement, good relations with Ukraine were also impossible. So with this situation, Sandu started her term. And in fact, during just few days, few weeks maybe, she achieved quite spectacular results. We also need to notice that Moldovan president has a very limited possibilities to act without government which cooperate with her. So, but in diplomacy, she is allowed by Moldovan constitution to act by her way, even without that support. But the problem will be with introduction all of these agreement which are achieved. And we need to notice about in which order Sandu tried to make her trips and visits of foreign heads of states. She started on the 29th of December, when President of Romania, Całus visited Chișinău. It was a good solution, good decision to make his visit in Chișinău and not to go to Bucharest. Why? Because in Moldovan society still are very, very strong sentiments about anti-Romanian sentiments, mostly in Russian-speaking part of society, in PSRM voters. So to avoid being accused of being unionist, it was better to welcome Iohannis in Chișinău than to go on her first trip to Bucharest. Of course, this was in mostly a visit very symbolic. It's as I said, it's difficult to make on the first meeting any special agreement, or especially when Sandu isn't able to introduce it without own government. But results were, even without that, quite spectacular. Iohannis announced that Romania will support Moldova with vaccines on COVID-19, with medical equipment, and also will bring specialists who will support a plan to vaccinate our Moldovan society with COVID-19. Just a few weeks later, on the 12th of January, she visited Kiev, where she met, among the others, with Volodymyr Zelensky. Also, here it was difficult to make any special agreements, because without own government it's impossible. But she signed with him two important memorandum, one about making cooperation between Moldova and Ukraine stronger, and second one about transport cooperation. There is said, for example, about construction a new road between Chișinău and Kiev via Dnistru River, but this will be possible to introduce, as I said, only with government. In relations with Ukraine, there is a lot of another problems. For example, using of Dniester or Dniestru water by Moldova and Ukraine, problem of water power plant which is constructed by Ukraine, problem of demarcation, delimitation of common border, problem of Moldova's states quarries, hotels which are situated on Ukraine's territory. Also problem of national minorities, where it's a more complicated because in Ukraine recognized both Moldovan and Romanian people as own national minorities. For Moldova is not an issue, but for Romania is an important issue because in Romanian thinking, all people who speak Romanian in Ukraine, in fact, are Romanians. But in both situations, Sandu achieved quite good results. Both contacts were unfrozen now. It is said to establish a new presidential platform of communication with Ukraine. Also, it's important to say about the meeting with ambassadors, which when Sandu said that she is expecting to establish a kind of, as she said, an axis of understanding between Romania, Ukraine, and Moldova, which maybe bring us a kind of new platform of cooperation between these three states. There's a lot of problems in relations with Ukraine, but nearly all of them are technical. But in relations with Romania, it's quite more difficult because they have very emotional background. Because of course, Romania is the most important supporter of Moldova in United Europe. But Sandus needs to be careful because she could be accused of being unionist, and this could be used as ammunition against her during early parliamentary elections, which maybe could happen in late spring. And we also need to remember that some of Sandu's voters were also Russian speaking, who voted for her because they are after Dodon's and Pessereme government, they are very disappointed with this. If you have any further question, I will ask them with pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Pieńkowski, for a very interesting and extremely insightful presentation. So we're now finished with our presentations and we are starting our discussion. I'm sure that after these stimulating presentations, the audience would like to ask some questions or to make some comments on the points our speakers made. I suggest to start our discussion from the following question. What are the main socio-economical problems of the Republic of Moldova, and what pro-European reforms have been announced by the new president during her election campaign and already during her first month, practically the first month of presidency? Maybe we'll start our discussion with from Dr. Ţîcu. Dr. Ţîcu, please. Can you unmute yourself?
I would like to congratulate Jakub with this presentation because it's very, very close to reality he described. Of course, the main social economic problems of Moldova at the moment, first is the budget deficit, which is minus 20 million probably. The lack of money, so the economic crisis is very deep, and the problem is also because Moldova is a country of remittances, which form altogether with the European investment approximately one budget. So of course pandemia, the fighting of pandemia, because Moldova faced a critical situation with the medical how to say system, very old, with lack of instruments, lack of equipment. Of course, Romania helped a lot. Romania gave Republic of Moldova €3.5 million equipment, medical, and send doctors in Moldova in different period to exchange experience. And as you know, probably Mr. Iohannis declared that 200,000 vaccine will be done to Moldova. Altogether, were 300,000 of equipment, and so on. So this, according to declaration of a president, will be the next problem. Will be to fight to overcome the consequences of socio-economic problems related to pandemic and economic crisis. And as to the reforms, it's hard to speak about reforms. The main discourse of Maia Sandu during presidential election was to fight corruption. So this was the key word in the campaign, how to fight corruptions. And of course, is a continuation of the campaign which was during the parliamentary elections. So to eliminate the consequences of a Plahotniuc regime, of oligarchic regime, to establish the justice, and of course to renew the principles of association agreement with the European Union. So that's the main, how to say, three problems which confront Moldova at the moment. So as Jakub said, very good. The main, probably the main challenge for Maia Sandu will be to set out of international isolation after the Dodon presidency, the improvement of relation with Ukraine, and the relation with European Union, United States, and of course Romania, which will be the main partner into the path of indeed Maia Sandu approach to current situation is all catch strategy. So they Maia Sandu started to speak in Russian during his public speeches, inauguration even. So some of the voters, of course, Russian speaker, which is very different in Republic of Moldova. And indeed, in some way, to be a kind of a good president. At the moment is difficult. We don't know what will be the result of all catch strategy, because from one side, Unionist Party will press for a closer relation with Romania. From another part, they will be disappointed with attempts to be good with Russians and to Russian speakers, too good maybe, and to be relatively kind in relation with Russia. From another part is the problem of Socialist Party and maybe of a party of Renato Usatăi, which is unclear from point of view maybe of external viewer, but it's very clear that Renato Usatăi represents the secret services of the Russian Federation. So it's complicated at the moment to speak about reforms from this point of view. Maybe resetting of external relation and overcome of pandemic and socioeconomic problems related to the lack of budget and the consequences of COVID.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Pieńkowski, do you want to add something? Please unmute yourself.
So, as Mr. Ţîcu said, for this moment, the most important problem for Moldova is corruption, of course, but we need to remember that Moldova is probably the poorest country in the whole Europe. Maybe for this moment, Ukraine is poorer, but just because of Donbas war. So there is a lot of things to do, and president still doesn't have tools to do it. In a more structural way, we also need to remember that Moldova still has own problem with state or national identity, which is very difficult to be solved, because as probably you know, about 20, sometimes nearly 30% of society during surveys support the idea of Unirea joining Romania. I saw this kind of survey before Sandu's presidency. And what does it mean? If all of these people really feel to be Romanians, some of them probably yes. But why, if it's true, pro-unionist parties collect not so many votes? For this moment, there is no unionist party in Moldovan parliament. Of course, in Sandu's party, there are people who support this idea, but it's hard to say that her party is a unionist party. The last one, which was in parliament, was Partido Liberal. Probably this situation is caused because many people are disappointed by Moldovan as a state in all ways which should normal states deliver to own society. And the only solution they see is to end with own state and to join Romania, to join European Union and to live in a normal state which support own society with all social, political, and another laws. And in this situation, Sandu has a very difficult position to satisfy these expectations of own society when she doesn't have tools to do it. So for this moment, probably this is the most important thing. She probably doesn't start a new discussion about identity issues, as if Moldovans are Romanians or if they are supporters of Moldovanism in Soviet style, because probably this will divide society and solution won't be found.
Thank you, Mr. Pieńkowski. And how do you think, is this the issue of integration into Romania? It is not an issue at the moment for Maia Sandu and her party.
In Moldovan society, this issue is still alive. But as I said, about 20, maybe 30% of society said during the survey that they will, in case of this kind of referendum, they will for joining Romania. But what with another 70%? And as I said also, if they really feel themselves as Romanians, or they are so disappointed with Moldovan state that they see Romania as an only possibility to start life of all of their children, grandchildren in a normal state.
Mm-hmm.
This is the question. Of course, we can also talk if it's possible in this international society, if Romania is in fact interested in joining Moldova, if European Union would support this, if Ukraine, if Russia, which in fact controls Transnistria, will accept this. I'm nearly sure that they won't allow this. I think that this Unirea was possible, but just for a moment at the beginning of 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment passed. Moldova started to be a part of international society. There also in Moldova are people who are not interested in this because there is local nomenclatura, local oligarchs who live in this very poor state, that they live very good because it's better to be, for example, as Dodon was, or Voronin, also previous president. It's better to be a president even in a very poor country than be a primar or head of Judets in Greater Romania. So for this moment, this issue is impossible to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I had a talk with Romanian diplomat, and I asked him about this, and he said quite interesting and in some way funny thing, because his answer was, yes, we are working very hard to not achieve this in the nearest 15-20 years, because Romania has own big problems, and even if we compare Romania and Moldova, Moldova is very, very poor states, and with Transnistrian issue, with a lot of national minorities which are after Soviet times very anti-Romanian, and Romania isn't able to join this kind so big territory and integrated. So in the future, we can predict it's impossible.
Thank you very much for your perspective. At the same time, maybe I address the same question to Octavian Siko, and just mentioning about the survey of barometer of public opinion. And according to this survey, the quantity of people that is supporting the idea of the union is with Romania during the last 3-4 years, is increasing from 17 to 33%, and the quantity of people not supporting this idea is decreasing. So just maybe...
but maybe just... of course, they are increasing but why they don't vote for unionist parties?
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely. Maybe Dr. Ţîcu will explain us this situation.
Well, you have to know that all political parties have unionists, including Socialist Party. In actual parliament of Moldova, there is 7 citizens of Romania from Socialist Party. And almost everybody from this parliament has Romanian citizenship. And the problem of representing unionism is, of course, the problem of the people who represented unionism up to this moment. And we have 2, important politicians. First was Yuri Roșca, who was a KGB agent. Mm-hmm. The second was Mihai Gimpu, which voted for the government of Plahotniuc in 2016. And that compromise, of course, myself as the president of Unionist Party, I joined in 2018 the Bloc Acum. I was a founder of Bloc Acum, and I brought to Bloc Acum all unionists which represented the moment the Party of National Unity. I participated in presidency elections, and I achieved the sixth place. And this is the highest number of voters for a unionist president candidate in the history of Moldova. And of course, the unionist is rising at the moment because Moldova has no resources and have no solution for the normal problems of a citizen of Moldova. And the accent of unionism changed because we put accents and we emphasize the arguments and advantages of being part of Romania, starting from pensions, from salary, from not only the identity issues. So the unionist is kind of enlightened in his approaches. And we have to expect the elections, the parliamentary elections, in order to have a clear situation, which will be the situation. For sure, in Romania, there is a divided opinion, Mr. Jakub, because Romania has from one side an official discourse and has a strategic partnership for supporting Republic of Moldova on the way to European integration. But in Romania, the former President Băsescu, which is now Europarlamentary, is unionist, and his party is unionist, and we have our party, which is clearly unionist in Romanian parliament. So it's not so easy to trace some lines, what will be the next steps in the problem of reunification. It's mostly because you probably know that on the way to European integration, on NATO integration, all countries from Eastern Europe signed the territorial reconciliation agreement. Poland signed with Ukraine, with Germany, Ukraine signed with Romania, and Hungary with Romania, except one single case. It's the case of Moldova and Romania. And Romania made very clear the idea that will not sign because any kind of political party which will say openly that we will not pledge for union is political dead. So one more word about there is no conflict between unionists and Euro-integralists. The difference is that unionists pledge for Euro-Atlantic integration first, and second, to one extent, to one moment, our interests are common of unionists and Euro-integralists. Because in any case, the integration of Republic of Moldova with European Union will be through Romania. I mean roads, railroads, I mean the energetic security, which of course should be traced to Romania, and the direct access of Romania, of Republic of Moldova in Europe will not be through Ukraine or Poland or any kind of country, will be through Romania. So here is our common position. And let's work, this is our vision, let's work on the situation when we will fulfill at least the minimum necessary for access this requirement of European integration. And then to see what the people of Republic of Moldova will say about this situation. It's very clear that the future, the European integration for Republic of Moldova as well as for Belarus and Ukraine is far, far away. The Moldovans could solve this problem very easy in a quick way with reintegration with Romania, and many people understand this because it's the most easiest and the most clear from this point of view. But of course, you are right. We have resistances. It was always like this. Resistances against even Maia Sandu, because you have to know that any kind of rapprochement between European Union and Republic of Moldova was followed by a reaction of minorities, problem in Gagauzia, and of course in Transnistria. So either European integration of Union with Romania, the resistance of Russia will be in any case.
Thank you. Thank you. And now let us speak with our audience. Already we have 4 questions from the audience. I can unite 2 questions. So the first one, do you notice a great change in terms of political discourses, behaviors, or power politics or policies after Maia Sandu's becoming a president? Or it's still difficult to distance from the nomenclatura? And the second question is really quite connected to it. This is a question from Mr. Ion Maxim. What are the main factors that can influence Maia Sandu's past potential losing of voters in the next elections, considering here both the international and external context? Do we have the willing person to answer? Mr.
I can start with second question.
Great.
Depends which elections, if they will happen in spring, if this will be early parliamentary elections, which Sandu is expecting to have in Moldova. Probably she will be able to keep this high support. But in fact, PSRM now is doing everything. They officially they are also supporting the idea of early elections, but they are doing everything to establish a new government which won't be able to rule Moldova, and to say that Sandu is responsible for this, because what kind of situation we have? Just one day before Sandu's inauguration, the government of Ion Ţîcu resigned. And socialists said, we are making things which is expected by Sandu. She wants to govern. Please take the government and rule Moldova as you wish. Mm-hmm. But with, as I said many times, without government, Sandu, in fact, is not able to do anything, any reforms, any changes. Also, socialists, and there was one more thing, that Ţîcu and three ministers of finances, economy, and health, the crucial ministries during the pandemic, also refused to work till the new prime minister and new ministers will be announced. They made it only to make a chaos in the government and in state apparatus. Also, we need to mention about few new laws which were voted by socialist and group Pentru Moldova, Shor Party, and former deputies from PDM, Plahotniuk's party. And what they did, they limited president's priorities. They also made situation in economic, also in social issues more difficult. Why? Just to make situation, common situation in Moldova more difficult, to make people angry, and to accuse that Sandu and her past made this. Because, as you probably know, control over Moldovan Secret Service was moved from president to parliament. That was the main tool of president's tool to influence on state security, but also on fighting against corruption, what was the most important during Sandu's campaign. Also a law about recognizing of Russian language as a language of inter-ethnic communication that was established. Why? In Moldova, Russian is commonly used in in public sphere. It's not a problem with using Russian in Moldova. But this law will be very expensive to introduce because it guarantees to be to achieve documents or to communicate with all offices in all territory of Moldova, also not only in Romanian, but also in Russian. For many, especially for local administration, this will be very expensive. On the other hand, when Sandu and PAS will try to change this law, this will probably cause protest of Russian speaking. In last national census, it was about 14% of people who use Russian in Moldova as a daily language, let's say like this. And for sure, when this will be tried to be changed, they will be disappointed. They will protest. Also, probably Russia will support them and made, for example, sanctions on Moldovan products. Also, law about retransmission of Russian propaganda in Moldovan media. This was changed by PSRM, and now it will be possible to broadcast this in Moldova. Also, in economic sphere, as Mr. Ţîcu said, in Moldovan budget for 2021, Mr. Ţîcu said it will be 20 million of Moldovan lei. For our viewers, maybe it will be easier to imagine how much is it, because it's about 25% of budget. It's 667, as far as I remember, million of dollars. Mm-hmm. And Moldova needs to get this money from the European Union, from international monetary funds, and socialists made everything to make it harder. For example, also just before, in the end of Dodon's, the last days of Dodon's presidency, they changed a law which reduced the age of being retired from 63, as it was, to 62 for men and 57 for women. Of course, this is popular with society. But if state budget will resist, if monetary fund will support Moldova in this case, this will be very difficult. Also, socialists made another smaller things. For example, they also changed a law which allowed to change area where was Republican Stadium, where only runs to sell this to United States to make them build new embassy. But all this, it's made to make Moldovan society and Sandu's voters disappointed.
Thank you.
She tried to be president. She is. She wants to govern. Please take the government. If you can't, what kind of president you are?
Thank you. Thank
This
you.
is this kind of play.
Dr. Ţîcu, do you want to add something?
What was the
question?
What was the first question?
The first question was, did you notice a great change in terms of political discourses, behaviors, or power politics or policies after Maia Sandu's becoming a president, or it's still difficult to distance from the nomenclatura? It is a first. And the second one, in fact, about the future elections, what are the main factors that can influence Maia Sandu's past potential losing of voters in the next elections, considering both the internal and external context? And maybe I can add another question. What could be the next the results of the next parliamentary elections for the parties and all the groups that are in the parliament, who can receive less or more seats in the parliament? For example, your party, how do you think from the perspective of your party?
It is a big mistake to think that the victory of Maia Sandu is the victory of a party of Maia Sandu. So because the victory of Maia Sandu was a victory of a unionist and Euro-integrist party, let's say of a pro-European orientation as such. Because it's a huge difference between the first leg and the second leg of elections. It's almost more than 20% added to Maia Sandu. So it's clear that the situation should be treated as such by Maia Sandu and by Sandu, by PAS, because the biggest mistake will be to treat the victory as a victory of PAS. In this situation, from a point of view of capturing the results of elections from November 15, should be the creation of a large alliance of unionist and Euro-integrist in order to capture the voter of presidential election. Otherwise, the situation for Maia Sandu will be critical because she will be a pro-European large party in opposition toward pro-Russian party of Usatei, of Dodon, and of a short party, because short party has no identity as such. They are businessmen. They will negotiate with Dodon and Usatei, as they did in this actual context with Dodon, because we know that this political majority, the parliamentary majority, is a contextual one, is not defined by any kind of orientation. It's a deal between Shor and Dodon, and what will be in the next parliamentary, if the pro-European Romanian, pro-European and pro-Romanian party will not join one single bloc alliance in the future election.
Thank you. Thank you. And now we have another two questions from the audience. Let us start with a question from Dr. Jakub from the Institute of Central Europe, and move to the, of course, to the Transnistria conflict. Is there any change to reintegrate Transnistria into the Moldovan state? And maybe I will add, what is the probability of the conflict in Transnistria? Is it a possibility that it will be unfrozen and maybe armed conflict will emerge? And what are favorable and unfavorable conditions for this? And what is the most important thing, what can be the reaction by the interested parties to the unfreezing of the conflict of Transnistria?
Well,
start with you, Octavian.
One American ambassador once said that the Transnistrian conflict is not a frozen conflict, it's a conflict of frozen solutions. Because we have plenty of instruments in Republic of Moldova and Chisinau to solve this problem, or at least to put a greater respect for Moldova in Tiraspol. This is the citizenship, this is the law to export into European Union, the transition. Of course, with Ukraine, we have to deal with Ukraine, but at the moment, Ukraine is more interested in solving on Transnistrian issue rather than Moldova is interested. And as you know, the Transnistrian regime survived with the support of Chisinau because our politician is well known with the oligarch from Transnistrian region. Of course, at a higher level, Russia will try to use Transnistria as a tool in elections, providing as large as possible voters for Socialist Party or for pro-Russian party, as happened during the last elections. And the number of voters is increasing up to 40,000 people, which count in the election of Moldova. Otherwise, there is no, how to say, a roadmap to integrate Transnistria into Republic of Moldova. There are some views from this point of view. There were many plans of settings, so-called Cossack plan with federalization of Moldova. It was the Cioroianu plan, for example, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, who said that we should freeze this Transnistrian issue and to integrate Moldova into European Union. It was the Yushchenko plan who proposed to democratize the Transnistria and after to ask them to unite with Moldova. So it was the Pieńkowski plan. Pieńkowski, it was a Russian influence who proposed Bessarabia to be taken by Romania and Transnistria to be independent. So approaches are different, but in any case, when Moldova is trying to make some steps toward European integration, we have problems with Transnistria. So our school, Romanian, because there are 9 high schools in Transnistrian region. We have problems with 15 villages which and the left bank but under the jurisdictions of Republic of Moldova, and they put pressure on the people who are living there. So and this is, by the way, the situation with Gagauz autonomy, because we saw at the beginning 2015-13 when Moldova is trying to be more pro-European, clear integration, we have problems with one or another minority, with Transnistria, with leftist pro-Russian parties. So this is the actual situation in Moldova, and the preferences are shifted. And they were compromised. They were compromised also by Plahotniuc regime and regime of Filat, because when European Union was associated with Plahotniuc and Filat, which were oligarchs, but they pledged for the idea of European Union, people associate European Union with these people. So this shifting preferences is a big problem in Moldova, but at the moment is important that we have 57% for pro-European candidate. Let's think how to do next in order to increase this confidence and to push it forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pieńkowski. Do you want to add something to say your perspective?
The most important problem with Transnistria is probably that, in fact, no one in Chisinau, in Tiraspol, is interested to solve this for many reasons. The most important, as Mr. Ţîcu said, is that people who are connected with Plahotniuc, with Sheriff Company, also many in Odessa, have a very good life with smuggling, because existing of Transnistria made it possible, because it's a kind of black hole. You can bring many things from Odessa port, officially export this to Moldova, and then this via green border is re-expected without taxes to Ukraine. The most fruitable things were cigarettes, but also poultry. Another thing is that it's a quite similar situation that it was with Voronin's regime and previous in Moldova. It's better to be a president or a high official, even if that kind of unrecognized Transnistria, than be probably no one in United Moldova. Another thing is that this was also not very expected by Moldovan government. Why? Because if one day Transnistria will be reintegrated to Moldova, it means that about 300,000 of people who are mostly pro-Russian, who are mostly Russian-speaking, will join Moldovan society, and they will also participate in Moldovan elections. Not in this way when we have during the last presidential election, where about 30,000 voted, and most of them voted because they were paid for this. And reintegration of Moldova with Transnistria will change Moldovan society, but also political scene. And this will be difficult and dangerous, because it will be unknown in which way this will happen. There are another problems, for example, privatization of companies in Transnistria, which were bought mostly by Russia, and what to do with this, recognize those changes or not. So in the nearest future, I don't think that it's possible to solve this problem, and it's not in fact very important to do this, because it's many times it's compared with Abkhazia or Ossetia or even Karabakh. But the difference is that level of national or ethnic hate between both banks in Moldova is very, very, very low.
Is low.
It's nearly nothing. Only sometimes in Transnistrian propaganda. Yeah. It's possible to cross this border, de facto border, to travel with car, of course with problems, but it's possible. And also Transnistrian products are allowed to be exported to European Union as Moldovan products. So in fact, there's no reason to or tools to leverage on Transnistria's side to do it. And there is no will on Moldovan side also to do this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now I would like you to move for very short to more global scene. And we have the question from Maxim Surzyński, from Dr. Maxim Surzyński, from the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences. The question sounds, how will Joseph Biden presidency influence on politics in your countries? I think how his presidency will influence Moldova and maybe Poland. If you can give some small, some view on that. And what policies do you think will accelerate or halt? What opportunities or risks may evolve? I think we can start with Dr. Ţîcu as a representative of Moldova.
We're happy with the idea that Mr. Biden visited Moldova in 2011, and we are happy with his presence. He knows what is Moldova and where is Moldova, and at least this is a good chance for Moldova to be known in the White House. At the moment, he was vice president of America. I do remember I was close to him during this visit. So we have some expectations as well, because he know what mean the neighborhood of Russia. He visited it, as I do remember, probably Ukraine also, and Georgia, so and Romania. So it's only my opinion from this point of view. I don't know, because we have no debate and any reference to what must improve or not, or expectation from his elections as president.
Thank you, Mr. Pieńkowski. What is your opinion? How can the presidency of Biden influence Moldova, the future of Moldova, maybe the future of Poland?
I don't think that this presidency will change a lot, because unfortunately, Moldova, for a country like United States, isn't priority. So, of course, probably United States will be still engaged in supporting Moldova with international resolving help. Probably Transnistrian issue will be a part of Russian and American talks, mostly the issue of evacuation of immunity from Kolbasna. But it's too small and too far away from the United States to be very engaged in Moldova, unfortunately.
Thank you. And we have one more question from the audience. It is a question from Ukraine, from Elena, from the Department of Yuri Fedorkovich National University. The question sounds, Moldova experiences a social-economic crisis which led to the flow of qualified specialists and youth abroad. How do you plan to interest them to work for the benefit and recreation of Moldova? Maybe Dr. Ţîcu?
Do you mean that we have invited some external? And once again, it was.
The question is about the Moldavians who left Moldova.
Okay.
Is it a
How to
possibility
bring them home?
come back is there any initiatives of the government, maybe of the president, could be to make them come back to their motherland?
Well, you have to know that in any case, I don't know how is it in Ukraine and another country, but Moldovans changed a lot in the last time. A large part of migration left forever, probably to Canada and United States. But in case of Europe, pandemic changed a lot of perception of these people. Many of them brought families to Italy, especially Spain, France, and Great Britain. Of course, situation in Great Britain is a bit different because mostly of our Moldovans working and living there with Romanian passports. So we have, in any case, we have a critical situation because the main feature of immigration changed. It was a period when Moldovans were working abroad and sending home for parents and for their children, but now they take their children and the parents to countries where they live. It's not so optimistic from this point of view, especially for rural areas, because I'm in 2 years I had a free electoral campaign, and I knew quite well the situation in rural areas, which is a catastrophic situation. And of course, taking into consideration the vote of diaspora, which exemplary mobilized for these elections, I think that they are thinking about Moldova. Many of them are returning home and waiting for changes in Republic of Moldova in order to have chance and opportunity to to come back. And we have in our mentality as such, the Moldovans, they are returning, they have a returning mentality from my point of view. They are waiting only for political context and economic, and of course for justice to be favorable to their returning and investment and so on. And, so that's my personal observation in relation with this question.
Thank you. Mr. Pieńkowski, do you want to say a few words, or we can move to the next question?
This is very difficult or even impossible to make an important quantity of people to come back, because they started life in, as it was said, in Italy, Spain, France, Romania also, and most of them work there, study, or just live with Romanian passports. So they are citizens of United Europe. For this moment, they still have grandparents or children in Moldova, but one day, not so long time, it will be need that grandparents will die, children will be able to end schools and be adults and to emigrate, or they won't need care. So connections between diaspora and Moldova will get weaker. And also, for this moment, we had a great mobilization of diaspora to vote for Sandu. If people will be disappointed with her, probably they won't be ready to be so active and to vote in the new elections. Because we saw in television situations when in Moldovan voting point somewhere in Germany, ballots were and people from Frankfurt drove with car to Stuttgart to vote. If people will be disappointed that they won't be able to make this kind of engagement.
I will add an argument. The problem is also the result of election, because any time when pro-Russian leftist party have a winning, let's say when was Voronin, when was Luchinsky, when after the what happened with Bloc Acum, we have a massive flew of Moldovans abroad. So they more and more want this disappointing indeed is a big problem probably of Moldova, the result of election.
Yeah, you're right.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doctor. This was a question from Dr. Alena Tretyakova. Sorry for not naming her surname when I presented her question. And maybe just finalizing our discussion, I have two different questions. So they're similar, but they are from different perspectives. Can you name Mr. Jakub Pieńkowski, can you name up to 5 main priorities of Poland in the relations with Moldova? And you, Octavian, can you name up to 5 priorities of Moldova in relations with Poland? Let's start from the Polish side, Mr. Pieńkowski.
For Polish foreign policy, Moldova is quite important state, because as all we know, Poland was an initiator of Eastern Partnership program, which is also addressed to Moldova. We are supporting Moldova in its tries to reform own state and to get closer to European Union. But on the other hand, we don't have common border. Our trade isn't spectacular. We recognize Moldova as a part of more wide space of Eastern Europe, together with Ukraine, which is closer to us, also in a political, social way, also Belarus. But we support Moldova, we support our Romanian partners in its policy on Moldovan issues. We also support Moldovan reintegration and solving of Transnistrian issue, but it needs to be done by both sides of the conflict, and also its foreign partners or protectors. We are not able to do this. That's it. We found Sandu's presidency with great expectations, and our government will support her with great pleasure. But the work needs to be done by Moldovans. No one will done without them.
Thank you. And Mr. Ţîcu, Dr. Ţîcu, what the main 5 priorities?
Well, Poland is indeed one of the most active partner of Republic of Moldova in the process of European integration, and its presence is obviously important for Moldova. I will mention here in June, Poland provided to Moldova help for COVID, thousands of euro. I don't remember exactly, but you can check it. And Poland was present, and that will stay for probably for I have to mention here that recently on December 13, we adopted the common declaration of Parliament of Republic of Moldova and Polish Sejm on the issue which mentioned the main priority in relation between two states, starting from help in fighting COVID. In the process of European integration, of course, we have expectation from Polish Presidency of Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which will be next year's in 2022. One important issue and priority for relation with Poland is the local administration collaboration, modernization of our villages and rural area, which happened with the support of Polish mayory cities and villages in Poland. The trade, which is sometimes is intensive, sometimes more or less no. We have at the moment a problem with Suzuki, Polski Suzuki. As you know, they bought a sugar plant in Kupchini, Moldova, and there is a problem. That's why Poland put some requirement regarding the allowing 1 million euro grant for Republic of Moldova. So of course we expect the presence of Poland in the process of helping Republic of Moldova, at least from point of view what mean the hybrid war and instruments to counteract the Russian propaganda. And from Polish side, there was explicitly pointed the idea of strengthening the security of Republic of Moldova through collaboration with NATO. And even if Moldova, you know, is a neutral country, but we have partnership for peace. So that's the main priority, which I maybe not 5, maybe more, but I pointed explicitly what were the agenda points during our discussion with a member of Polish Parliament.
Thank you.
Maybe I just add that Poland is very engaged in Moldova on local level. As Mr. Ţîcu said, we have in Ialoveni, it's a city near Chișinău, contact point for Moldovan local authorities. And we organize financial help for them, also we train local leaders in Moldova. So Poland is very engaged on that level. Also, every year we support from Polish Help. It's a program of Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs of international development. And we every year support Moldovan self-governments with, for example, local medicine centers.
Let me bring you a good news, because today I pledged the law of Russian language in the Constitutional Court. Just 2 hours ago, I pledged from as member of Parliament, and Constitutional Court considered unconstitutional the law of Russian language. So we may congratulate each other. It's a good news.
They recognized it as not allowed by Constitution, yeah?
It was considered not allowed. It's good.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your views and about the main priorities of your countries in relations with each other. And as we saw, they are a little bit different. And I think it is really a wonderful and the perfect framework for the next discussion about future for the future Polish-Moldavian dialogue. Unfortunately, the time limitations may not allow us to discuss and to exhaust all the subjects we want to share with each other. But I think this event, today's event, it helped us to initiate a new discussion platform on Moldova's European integration perspectives. To conclude, I would like to once again thank all the participants for their valuable contribution and questions, and to thank the speakers for their accepting of our invitation and to share their knowledge and to lead the discussion. And a special word of appreciation to my colleagues from the Institute of Central Europe for their support in making this event possible. Thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice day.
Have a nice day.